Hello, welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra, and today we are focusing on the violence in Sudan, which has taken the lives of 400 people, injured nearly 4,000 more. The unrest began after intense clashes broke out between the country's military and paramilitary forces known as the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. The two factions have been locked in a power struggle despite indicating unwillingness to restore civilian rule. In latest developments, the RSF agreed to a 72-hour ceasefire on account of Eid. However, bombing and shelling was reported in several parts of the capital, Khartoum. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken have separately appealed to the warring factions to observe the ceasefire for the next 3 days. Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a high-level meeting to review the situation of Indians stranded in the country. India is working on contingency plans to evacuate 3,000 stranded Indian nationals in the country. To talk more about the conflict, the road ahead, we are now joined by former Indian Ambassador Anil Trigunath, former Indian diplomat Ashok Sajjanar, Ajay Dubey, chairperson of the Center for African Studies at the School of JNU, and Aloina Sinenko, regional spokesperson for Africa at International Committee of the Red Cross. Thank you very much for joining us. Aloina, if I could ask you about the situation on the ground. Yes, a ceasefire has been agreed upon, but is it really being observed on the ground?
Well, until now, we have seen multiple announcements about the ceasefire, but what we are seeing on the ground until now, unfortunately, is that for us, security conditions are simply not there for our teams to be able to move around the city safely and to deliver urgent supplies.
Right, and we have been reading how thousands of people, at least 20,000 people, have fled to neighboring Chad, but the situation there remains very dire, and we really don't know about the situation of people on the ground. But let me also get in Ambassador Trigunath at this point and Ambassador Sajjanar. Ambassador Trigunath, if I can begin with you, do you see this warlike situation between the two factions, the head of the military and the head of the Rapid Support Forces, coming to an end anytime soon? Do you think any of the countries can play a role in bringing this battle to an end?
Well, at the moment, I think, unfortunately, it is very difficult for any country or any organization to play any constructive role there. We have seen that in 2021, when the army toppled the civilian regime there by the Prime Minister Hamdok. At that time, they were expelled from the African Union. So African Union really does not have any great control at the moment, or cannot do anything more than that. As far as United Nations is concerned, there are several organizations and they have been attacked, and they are also in a very dire strait, as has been mentioned by the ICRC representative. On the other hand, we see only Arab League, where Sudan is also a member, is trying to work on it. But this is essentially a power grab by these by General Hamidati, as he is called famously. And this particular grouping is called as Janjaweed militias during the Darfur time, has also been engineered and was created and given the military ranks by the previous president, Omar Bashir. Ironically, both the general of the military forces, Burhan and Hemeti, both of them jointly toppled Bashir. And then eventually they both won. Now, today, what is the situation is that Hemeti wants to take the power, whereas, equal power in that sense, because he's number 2 at the moment in the current military council, but they have tasted the power. So it's a question of power grab. And it's a very strong, very, very violent kind of a militia, which does not respect anything. And therefore, this problem is going to continue. Of course, there are 3 presidents,
right.
Kenya, South Sudan, and Djibouti, the neighboring countries. They are made a team and they are talking to both sides. But how far they can really prevail upon them depends on both the generals.
Right. Let me also get in Ambassador Sajjanar at this point. Ambassador Sajjanar, could there be any external factors, external actors fanning the violence? There have been a lot of reports over the last few days about Russia's Wagner Group. this mercenary group supporting General Hemedati. And this has been happening since 2019, according to certain reports. There are also reports how Russia is actually leveraging Sudan to bankroll the war against Ukraine. So what do you feel about Russia's role in fanning the violence right now?
You know, Parikshit, in the past, it might have been happening, in terms of what you are saying. But I think at the moment, both these groups, both General Burhan as well as General Hemedti, they are sort of, there's such a tug of war that is going between them. There is such a past struggle going on between them, each one of them trying to get the upper hand as far as the other is concerned. And, Darfur, from Darfur, the Janjaweed who have come, and they, in the first decade of this century, they were reported to have really brought out the worst genocide, the first genocide of this century. So these are very hardened fighters. They are fighting both for the survival as well as for, grabbing more power in the country. I don't think at the moment they would be having any attention, they would be in a position to pay any attention or focus on, supporting Russia or supporting any of the other powers or forces outside the country. I think both of them are really trying to dig in their heels and, get as much advantage as possible on the battlefield. Of course, in addition to what Ambassador Tignath has said about the involvement of the three neighboring countries who are trying to play a role, we do see that Egypt and the Egyptian president particularly has a good equation with General Burhan, who's the army chief. So they are trying to work with him. And UAE and Eritrea, they have some sort of leverage as far as the RSF and General Dagolo Hemedti is concerned. So they are also trying to work with them. But then they are not seen to be honest brokers. Right. So I don't know how much they will really be able to contribute. Parikshit.
Ambassador Sajjanar, I'll come back to you. Let me also get in Mr. Ajay Dubey. Mr. Dubey, what are India's options? Today, the Prime Minister has held a high-level meeting. He asked everyone in the government and in the forces to make contingency plans, look at all options, speak to friendly nations. How can we go about using our diplomatic leverage with some of the African nations, with UAE, with Saudi Arabia, US and UK? What do you think will determine India's rescue operation to bring out those 3,000 Indians stranded in Sudan?
Well, to get them out, the first thing you need is a situation where evacuation operation can be effected. As was pointed out, both the generals are fighting a war where they are not going to listen to external parties. They just want to win, because anyone who is going to give concession to the other is going to get finished. This war is like a typical African war where the chain of command is not very clear, especially with rapid support force, which is a militia kind, as was pointed out. It doesn't have a clear-cut command line as you have with the military. And so at any level, if the military also wants to go for a truce, then there is not going to be the same response from this militia group. The second thing is that how to make a situation where evacuation can be effected is something that diplomatically can be tried to create a situation where you get enough time to get these people out, but seems to be difficult. But nonetheless, the best option is to wait and watch for better time and keep the operational plan ready, that whenever there is a window, one should just go for it and evacuate that.
All right. Aloyna, coming back to you, as far as the ground situations go, we have been getting reports how a very large number of civilians, thousands of them, have taken shelter in schools, colleges, hospitals, and even hotels in the area. What is their situation as far as essential supplies go, their safety of women and children?
The situation is getting desperate and getting more desperate with every hour that this uninterrupted fighting continues. Now soon's going to be, tomorrow's going to be a week since it started, and there was no respite for civilians during this entire time. They are scared. They are running out of supplies, running out of food, water. There's been entire neighborhoods without water, without electricity. But the most importantly for us, the biggest concern at the moment is the worsening situation at the hospitals. The hospital personnel, they have been unable to reach their workplace. Hospitals are also running out of supplies. They don't have food. They don't have electricity. So this situation is becoming increasingly desperate, and we're urgently calling for humanitarian access to be able to move around.
Right. Ambassador Trigunath, coming back to you, keeping this kind of a situation in mind, and first of all, would you say that this kind of violence is unprecedented? You have UN aid organizations, their offices are being looted, burnt as well. International organizations like Doctors Without Borders, ICRC, the Red Cross, they're not getting access to these affected areas. They're not getting access to people who have been injured, to hospitals. Is this a situation not seen before in the area?
Well, this pretty much happens every time, but most of the places it has not happened much worse. But we have seen these kind of situations in Darfur, in Sudan itself. When Sudan and South Sudan, this problem was happening, we have seen it there. I've been ambassador to Libya. I mean, we have seen those kind of situations there also. So whenever there's a civil war, this is virtually a free-for-all kind of a thing that happens. Only one thing is that this RSF, when they started attacking, it was in the evening, and so therefore nobody was there in the embassies or those offices. So we did not see very many casualties, even though one of our Indian citizens was killed in this violence. But I think that at the moment, what is happening is they'll have to essentially be prevailed upon by some other forces. Otherwise, this is going to continue to fight to finish, because it's very difficult for these two generals to come, because see, RSF General Hemeti today, he was always very strong. And he agreed to number 2 position at the time. But since the army was supposed to hand over charge on 11th of April, they saw that there was not going to be enough space for him to continue to remain in power. And that's the reason that they have tried to grab the power this time and attacking the army also. So I think the best bet is if the army is able to prevail upon the RSF. That's the only way that one could see some kind of respite eventually, because they are not listening to, because as we all know, this is what happens in these kind of situations. But of course, the humanitarian crisis, as has been mentioned, is really
Sir,
worsening.
we're running out of time. I'll quickly get some questions in.
Not even by the day. Sorry?
Right. Sir, I'll come back to you. We're running out of time. I want to put some quick questions to Ambassador Sajjanar and Mr. Dubey. Ambassador Sajjanar, as far as the international view on Sudan right now, which country or group of countries has the greatest influence on what is happening right now, and which are the countries which can actually bring some sort of solution to the ground?
You know, that's a very difficult question to respond to, because, you know, all these countries in the vicinity, in the neighborhood, they are seen to be siding with either of the two countries. You would recall that when Antony Blinken had spoken to both the leaders, and they agreed even for a 24-hour ceasefire, but even that was not implemented. On the ground, you know, it did not happen. And right now we have seen, whether it is, we've spoken about Moscow, we've spoken about Egypt, we've spoken about UAE. In fact, when the UAE ambassador was seen in one of the cities, there were demonstrations against him because he is UAE is supposed to be siding with the RSF. I think this is RSF seems to be having an upper hand at this moment, because the army is supposed to be in power as far as Khartoum is concerned, and all these RSF Janjaweed militia, they are coming from the west, they are coming from Darfur. So I think the Janjaweeds look at it, RSF and Hemeti looks upon it as the best possible chance to come as close to power as he can, because he will not get another opportunity to come so close to par. And, as has been mentioned, it was supposed to transition to a civilian administration on the 11th of April. And that is the fact that it didn't happen on that day, the fact that it didn't happen on 13th April, that has angered the people also, the population also. But neither of the two generals are concerned at all about what the people are going through or what they are thinking. Parikshit.
Absolutely. And of course, a lot of worries and concern about the plight of 3,000 Indians who are spread across Sudan. And we are trying to get them evacuated as soon as possible. And that's what the meeting at the Prime Minister's level was all about a short while back. Ambassador Trigunath, Aloyna, Ambassador Sajanar, Ajay Dubey, we'll have to leave it there for the moment. But thank you very much for joining us here on Global Eye, telling us about the situation on the ground and really no solutions in sight just yet. We're going to take a short break here on the program, but coming up, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warns current climate policies are a death sentence for the world. A discussion with Saurabh Kumar of Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet when we're back.
Welcome back. Reliance Jio has just announced its Q4 numbers and they're bang in line with street expectations. The rupee revenue growth stands at 1.72% on a quarter-on-quarter basis at 23,394 crore. This compares with our expectations of a 1.8% growth. So the top line revenue growth for Reliance Jio, that's the telecom business of Reliance Industries, stands at 1.72% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. On a year-on-year basis, the growth rate stands at nearly 12%. But the growth rate for Reliance Jio has slowed down. So this 1.7% revenue growth on a quarter-on-quarter basis will compare with an over 2% growth in the December quarter, a near 3% growth in the September quarter, and a 4.5% sequential improvement in the company's growth rate in the June quarter. One of the reasons for that is the lack of a large prepaid tariff hike. The street has been awaiting a prepaid tariff hike, but that's been absent, and that's hurting the revenue growth or the growth rates for the company. So revenue growth at 1.72%. The company Reliance Jio has been adding a lot of subscribers. In fact, in the month of January, they added 1.65 million subscribers. So the subscriber addition has been there, and that's driving the top line growth. But the ARPU increase, which is fueled by a large price hike, has been absent. And that could explain why the revenue growth for Reliance Jio, and this could be a trend across the other telecom companies as well. At the margin level, it's very, very stable. 52.2% in the current quarter compares with 52.2% that we had in the prior quarter. But generally, Reliance Jio's margins have been on an uptrend. Because the margins are so flat, the bottom line growth coincides or reflects the revenue growth. So the profit growth has come in at 1.7% on a quarter-on-quarter basis at 4,716. We only have three numbers from Reliance Jio: revenue, margins, and profits. What we await is the subscriber addition number, where roughly it's seen estimated growing at 5 to 6 million subscriber additions, and the ARPU number, the average revenue per user, that's going to be tracked very closely as well. But don't expect a big jump in the ARPU numbers. Nitin Soni, Senior Director of Corporates at Fitch Rating, is now with us on the show. Nitin, what would be the key numbers that you would track, and what would be the factors driving the performance this time?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. So I think it's going to be a steady quarter. We are not expecting any significant growth in the revenue base and any expansion in the EBITDA margin. As you rightly described, there is a lack of prepaid tariff hike. But at the same time, we do believe that a prepaid tariff hike is imminent. It has been delayed because of inflationary conditions and because of a natural subscriber growth at the expense of Vodafone Idea. But I think a prepaid tariff hike could happen in the next 6 to 12 months. And the average revenue per user, in our view, would have been sort of flat or maybe a single-digit percentage growth in this quarter for Reliance Jio. But average revenue per user will benefit from a tariff hike in the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, so you are expecting a prepaid tariff hike to take place in the next 6 to 12 months. Jio per se has been moving a lot on the other businesses, the digital businesses, whether it's Jio TV, Jio Cinema. We know the kind of audience that the company has received for IPL, the rights that they secured. So do you think, these things will start contributing to the Jio platform numbers? We typically look at the Jio numbers, the telecom numbers, but these get housed under Jio platforms. And 90% of, Jio platforms revenues come from the Jio business, the telecom business. But the balance 10% is from the other digital businesses. Do you see a lot of progress taking place in the other digital businesses of Reliance?
Sure. I mean, we have to understand that the bulk of the revenue would still come from the wireless services, but at the same time, there are other business segments which are growing probably faster than the wireless services, like, as you said, the digital services and the platform services. We do believe the fixed broadband services are growing quite robustly. And as Reliance Jio has a large fiber infrastructure, they are taking the benefit of their large infrastructure. And the fixed broadband, which is still underpenetrated in India compared to the addressable large population, family population we have, I think that is one business segment which we expect it to continue to grow strongly. The other business segments which are also growing strongly are the enterprise business segments, which 5G will support, as 5G will initially cater more to the enterprise sector. And the data center sector is also something which all these telcos are heavily investing in. And we also expect data center revenue to grow quite strongly in the next few years.
Nitin, we'll try and reconnect with you when we have more on the numbers. But thank you very much for joining in and giving us your initial reaction. So there you have it. Reliance Jio, the telecom business of Reliance Industries, has reported their Q4 numbers, and they've come bang in line with street expectations. 1.7% revenue growth quarter on quarter, a 12% jump on a year-on-year basis, margins stable at 52.2%, and the profit jump and the profit numbers at more than 4,700 crores reflects an improvement of 1.7% quarter on quarter. We're going to slip into a very short break. On that note, we'll come back with more news and updates.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. Current climate policies are a death sentence for the world. That's a warning from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He referred to major economies as the big emitters and called for decisive action, as otherwise today's policies would make our world 2.8 degrees hotter by the end of the century. According to a new paper by Boston Consulting Group and the World Economic Forum, the Asia-Pacific region could unlock $4.3 trillion in revenue by 2030 from expansion of renewable power and energy efficiency initiatives, and 232 million new jobs could be created. Now, for World Earth Day, we discuss what could be some of the immediate focus areas for the Indian government to mitigate the impact of climate change and also the economic opportunity for the private sector. We are joined by Saurabh Kumar, India Head of Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Mr. Kumar, thank you very much for joining us. Let's begin with what's happening in India. We're seeing a strong heat wave, and the University of Cambridge, in its latest report, suggests that more than 90% of the country could be severely impacted by heat waves in the future. What do you think about India's fight against climate change, and what needs to be done now and immediately?
For inviting me. Yes, we have been seeing this inclement weather, whether it is the floods or the storms. And it's not that the government of India is not doing anything. I think if you look at the policy statement, the ambitions that have been put out by the government, I think it is far more ambitious than any other developing country per se. But what needs to be done is basically look at those sectors which will see a lot of requirement for energy. And these are semi-urban, rural areas. How can we shift the action there to renewables rather than on fossil fuels? So a large part of our effort to support the government will be on basically adopting energy efficiency and also decarbonization of the rural sustainable development. And that's where our current focus is. The second area that needs immediate attention in terms of climate action is transport, electrification of transport. While railways is on track for decarbonization by 2030. I think the public transit area getting to e-buses, two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and also, more importantly, charging these vehicles using renewable energy are immediate steps that need to be taken. And I think every one of us in this area and also otherwise agree that this is a climate emergency and we have to act fast, we have to act at scale, and this is what our ambition as GR in India and also globally is.
Right. I'd like to ask you about whether it is time that we have mandates for the industry and for citizens in order to meet our climate action goals, like the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States. Do you think we need a mandate like that to give a clear roadmap to the industry, to the private sector, and to the average citizen?
So, Parikshit, I think there needs to be a balance between them. We need to do. If you recollect, about 10 years ago, the government of India already has given targets to high energy consuming industries in terms of reduction of specific energy consumption, and that program has been going on extremely well. Also, many states, if you look at incentives and policies for electric vehicles, I think they are among the best and cutting edge as far as the world is concerned. What is hopefully coming up, and we have seen action on the legislative side, is a domestic carbon market, and it'll be a combination of targets plus incentives, because targets alone cannot mandates alone cannot do everything. We also need to incentivize. There is need to be a larger flow of climate finance into this area, and also necessary that we must have low-cost, sustainable finance to make sure that people make the right choices. So I think these are two, three important steps that have already been taken, and we are well on course, at least in the industrial decarbonization space, to reduce energy consumption in a very big way.
Mr. Kumar, my final question, and this would be, what can the average citizen do? Now, we're talking about World Earth Day. Every year during the World Earth Day, we make pledges as citizens. India is taking the Lifestyle for Environment mission across the country, and we may hear some announcements on that front as well. But from what point of view, what can average citizens do on a daily basis to help as far as the climate crisis goes?
I think, number one, what Mission Life has brought to the fore is that climate is not just government's agenda. It is everyone who needs to contribute. What can we do? Simple little things. As far as electricity use is concerned, use efficient equipments, make sure that you conserve electricity as much as possible. When you come to transport, can we shift to public transport? Can we do pooling? So the wasteful expenditure on electricity, on energy, needs to really come down very, very significantly. And that's where I think each one of us, not just the government, each one of us have a liability, responsibility to contribute to reversing the climate change impacts. And that's what I think the Mission Life very, very succinctly brings to the fore, the responsibility of a responsible citizen.
Right. We've run out of time, but Mr. Kumar, thank you very much for joining us here on Global Eye on the occasion of World Earth Day with your recommendations. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.